Hey guys, Jackson Dean here. Welcome back to another episode of the Business and Travel Podcast. Today I am joined by Stephanie Coombes, who is a representative from the ABC national radio station. And we're just going to have a quick back and forth about Stephanie's sort of career and journey and some of the things that she's working on at the moment. And I hope you guys get a lot out of it. There's some little gems inside, so listen closely. And Stephanie, please introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about your history.
Thank you very much, Jackson. So at the moment, I'm a freelancer, but I have worked all across radio. I've been in talkback radio. I was briefly hosting a radio show in Broome, Western Australia, also for the ABC, but I get bored quite quickly. You can stick to something and build businesses and build empires. I build cubby houses and then burn them to the ground. So I got a bit sick of doing my own breakfast show for a while, and then I'm back to doing sort of freelance stuff, learning Japanese this year and interviewing people like you for radio documentaries.
There you go. So what is the most recent radio documentary that we're working on, I guess?
So this one is about Instagram fame. It's something that people, I think, don't really have a great understanding of Instagram. I think that a lot of people assume that it's this narcissistic application that has no real world use, that it's just something that's a sign of how degenerate the younger generations are and how, why would anyone do it? But I see it, and obviously me and a lot of bigger companies see it as something is a bit more important than that. So I'm doing a bit of an explainer about Instagram for people who might not know it, and underpinning that is my own deeply flawed journey to try and get myself a little bit of Instagram fame. Not going so well at the moment.
So Instagram as a whole, as a platform, what are the things that you enjoy most about it?
I follow a really broad group of people. I think that that's what I like about it is you get to see how a lot of people live. It's kind of weird. Do you find this? I don't know if you find this, but I find this. I find that like when I'm flicking through Instagram, there are people who I follow, who I've been following for years, who are just ordinary Americans or whatever, and maybe they're funny or maybe they're attractive, but I feel invested in their lives, and no one knows who they are. My friends don't know who they are, and that's kind of interesting. It's almost like your family expands in this really weird one-sided way,
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I get that. Who do you follow on Instagram?
For the most part, I mean, I honestly steer clear a lot of the home feed and looking at the home feed. I spend so much time on social media that I just try and detox myself from like just being on there and flicking through it. But if I follow anyone, it's probably, hip hop, hip hop culture, like,
Really?
Musicians. I follow a lot of them. And then some business, entrepreneurial sort of motivation stuff that a few of the bigger businessmen or entrepreneurs around there, they're putting out some decent content. So I look at those sort of two things myself the most. If I was going to follow anything, it'd be in those two sort of areas.
Now, I might be a bit different to you, but I don't follow anyone who I think is too far above me. I don't like anyone who's like Kardashian hot or anything. Like, I don't want anyone who's too hot. I don't want anyone who's too rich. I kind of like to follow people who are kind of my level, sort of average Joes who take good photos, because otherwise I just feel bad about myself.
Well, the thing you have to learn about Instagram is that the Instagram life and real life are two completely different universes. Like, when you go behind the scenes of most of the Instagram influencers, they are not as happy as you might think, and definitely a little more stressed than you might assume. So, a lot of them are trying to run a business and they put on a pretty face to run that business, some of them. And at the end of the day, everyone is quite normal. Just because you have a whole lot of followers doesn't make you any better or different to anyone else. So honestly, can make it worse. Like if you've got a whole bunch of followers and you value that, it's going to change the way you look at the world, probably not in a positive way. So follow people that are well-grounded. And some well-grounded people have millions of followers. But you can see it in their messaging whether or not they're true to it or not. But I guess more onto your story. What have you done over the last, 10 years? What are you most proud of? Some of the things that have been successes?
Well, look, I mean, I think that media is a little bit probably like social media. If you have a bit of success, some of it's hard work and a lot of it is luck, being at the right place at the right time. So I used to work for one of the main talkback stations in Sydney, and I went from being an intern there to an executive producer in charge of one of the top rating shows there pretty quickly. That was a bit of an achievement. And I always had this lofty goal in my head that I really wanted to present my own radio show. And it was just one of those goals that you didn't really kind of expect to sort of achieve. It was just something that was, one of those lofty things that are in the far, far, far future that, I left radio for a bit. I did a bit of freelance writing for magazines, doing all sorts of bizarre stories for magazines and for papers and for online. And that was a good year. I do believe in working hard, then taking a little bit of time off to sort of reassess creatively. If you're a creative person, especially a creative person in the media, you are constantly fighting burnout. So I'm quite prone to burnout, so I take a lot of time off and on. Yeah. And when I was kind of enjoying one of those more quiet years where I was just working creatively on sort of my own projects, a job came up to present the breakfast show in Broome in Western Australia, which is extremely remote. And that meant leaving my beautiful share house in Sydney of 5 years and flying to somewhere which is, this is how remote Broome is. It's 20 hours drive to your nearest city, 20 hours south and you get to Perth, 20 hours north and you get to Darwin. So that's how far, it's miles away from anything, Broome. And flights are really expensive, but it was a bit of an adventure. And I loved my office. I was working with some wonderful, very, very creative people. But to be completely honest, I did not actually enjoy hosting my own show that much. So that lofty goal was reached, and then it was just that odd sort of thing. It's like, I've done it, but I don't know if I want to keep on doing it. So I finished out my contract there, and I had a wonderful year, and I don't regret it one bit. But it's that sort of funny thing that sometimes you reach your goals and then you've got to find another one. So That's kind of where I am at the moment, doing more sort of radio documentaries, which I've always really enjoyed. But I think there's a lot to be said about living a life that isn't so goal-driven that you find yourself at a loss once you reach them. I don't know, maybe is that something that you have, that, you're always reaching for the next goal and the next goal, but...
It's important to set goals, but it's important to know what to do when you get to it, because I had the exact same thing happen to me. This is a cool story. So when I was in grade 10, I went to this youth summit conference, and the speaker there on the day, he was asking, where do you want to be when you grow up, basically, or what is the absolute biggest goal you can think of that you want to achieve? And the activity was, you'd have this wooden board that you had to punch through, and you had to write your goal on the board. And so I still have the board to this day that says, if I can punch through this board, I can manage a hedge fund. And so it was so weird. I was like year 10 and
what kid who's in year 10 wants to manage a hedge fund? That is the weirdest goal I have ever heard. What were you, 16?
I was 15.
15.
So when I was 13 years old, I was reading technical analysis trading textbooks for fun in my free time.
Nah, you're a weirdo. When I was 16, I was looking forward to dessert. That's what I had my goal set on, is a big dessert that night. Anyway, so go on.
So I put my hand up and he said, what do you want to do by the time you're, I think he said by the time you're 25. And I said, I want to own a hedge fund. And he laughed and chuckled a bit, and everyone did in the audience. And that's, I think, what motivated me to do this even more. Everyone laughed and was like, why do you want to own a hedge fund? Like, who do you think you are? And he's like, you can't actually own a hedge fund, but you can manage a hedge fund. And I was like, that sounds pretty good too. Yeah, whatever. That sounds good. So I had this weird subconscious goal. Anyways, went up on stage, punched through the board, broke it. I was like, yeah, okay, sweet. Now, didn't really think too much about it after then, but when I finished my finance degree, I got basically an intern job at this brokerage firm. And one of those jobs where you work like stupid hours, like 80 to 120 hours a week, and you just grinding, trying to get promoted. And in 2 years of doing that, I went from like a junior trader to a professional trader to the general manager of the company. And then I was also the general manager of the hedge fund. And so I was managing a hedge fund at the age of 21. I think I just turned 22. And I was managing a hedge fund. And then all of a sudden, like a few months later, I just got so uninterested in like the whole job. Like I was literally at the very top of this company. I worked my way up in like 2 to 3 years. Got exactly what you would ever want as far as a salary goes and money and all that. And I got the title and I had the industry credibility. Like across Australia, we used to fly, Brisbane, Gold Coast, Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, Perth, and we do it every month and go and speak at conferences. And I was doing it. I was managing this hedge fund and then I just completely lost interest one day. And I think I didn't even realize why at the time, but it wasn't until I think it was about a year later and I started up a handful of businesses that didn't work. And I was just like really trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I was like, why did I actually leave? Like, I don't exactly know why. Like, I don't need the money or anything, but I still don't know why I left. And then I found this board in my room that was broken in half, this board. And I read the board and I was like, I think I've been subconsciously trying to hit that goal since I was 15. And then I got there. And then all of a sudden I had no idea why I was there or what I wanted to do with it. It was just like, why did you want to manage a hedge fund? It was
Absolutely. Well, that's the question you should have been asking as a 16-year-old. But that's how I feel as well. And I don't know if the solution to that is to balance goal making with general living, or if the solution is to set loftier goals. That maybe you should set a goal that's so absurd that you'll never reach it and you'll always be sort of reaching for excellence instead. But I think that's a real issue. I think that if you build a universe around yourself where you're constantly just reaching the next goal, then you'll hit them. And then you've got to work out what else. There needs to be something else that's kind of propping your life up, hobbies, friends, or whatever, or something else. But or maybe just bigger goals that you'll never reach. So you'll be forever hoping to get there and never actually getting there.
Yeah, like I've seen a few things on goal setting, and you do need to set like short, medium, long-term goals. And a great example is Gary Vaynerchuk, where he sets this goal of like he wants to buy the New York Jets because the company, if he buys them, is worth $4 or $5 million or $1 billion. Sorry. Yeah. And I don't even know how much it's actually worth. It's probably worth a hell of a lot more than that. Yeah. But if you have a goal like that, it's theoretically achievable. I mean, when you're at that level, you're going to probably speak that out and say that that's your goal. But you know that it's a 20 to 30 year goal. And if you truly did want to do that, then you would wire all your decision making towards that goal every day, then every week, every month, every year. You'd have that like guiding north, like true north goal. But then at the same time, it's just like, I feel like if you do that, you almost wish life away. Because you're like, I don't feel like I'm complete until I get to that moment in my life. Not living in the moment. And all of a sudden you wake up like 30 years later. And like for my example, it was like running a hedge fund. I basically woke up like 7 years later. It took me 7 years to get there between studying and working and after hours and all that sort of stuff. Then you finally get there. That's a pretty large goal. Like it's a goal I didn't think you would hit until you're like 35. Like no one would usually hit that goal until they're 35. And I just happened to hit a really good career path that allowed me to get there by 22. And then all of a sudden I had no idea what to do. So it was like, that was a pretty long-term goal. And then ever since it's sort of like, well, my goal since has just been even bigger.
What's a goal now? What's the goal now that you're working on?
Well, I wire it towards Instagram marketing because we have like this window of opportunity to take advantage of it while it's still a thing that you can take advantage of. I don't honestly believe, Instagram marketing is going to be as beneficial, say 2 or 3 years from now, because Instagram themselves are going to tighten the whole thing up and and own it all.
Try and make money off it themselves rather than letting it go.
Yeah, and they're already doing that, but they're not doing it to the level they're going to be doing it in, say, 2 or 3 years. So I have this, my goal right now is to train 10,000 businesses in Australia and abroad on how to conquer Instagram marketing. Now, I know that that's a short-term goal, but then I can easily replace that same mission statement with basically whatever the best marketing strategy is in the world at that point in time. I want to train 10,000 businesses, and like we're already getting up around over 1,000 now. So like I'm even moving towards that goal quite quickly.
Yeah.
And so when I finish that one, it'll be for sort of like a moment in time where I'll go, listen, I've actually helped over 10,000 businesses, which has helped who knows how many, like hundreds of thousands of employees and people. And then I feel like my goal's always geared like from a life perspective around helping people at the most basic level. And we have a huge charity side of our company, like almost 15-20% of like what we make goes to charities that we believe in. And one of those is Compassion Australia. We have heaps of sponsored kids and families around the world that we sponsor. So it's like, that's the underlying driven motive. So it's like you've been blessed or given a life in a country that's like so much better than like 99.9% of the world. It's sort of your duty and responsibility to then use what you've been given to help out as many other humans as you can.
Yeah.
So my weird way around doing that is to help businesses grow, which helps them hire more people and increase their bottom line so that they have more money, so that they have more money to do good things with. And usually if they're working with me, like they're usually pretty good companies to start with when we're vetting them, getting them on board and all that. So they're like the underlying goals, like why we do what we do. At the end of the day, it's like I'm a very help-driven person. I like coaching, I like teaching, I like giving advice, I like getting advice as well, if anyone would like to give us some.
Yeah, Lord knows I need some. So if going back to what you said, that you think that there's a window of opportunity where Instagram will be what it is at the moment. It's a bit of a wild, wild west. There's a lot of money to be made.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, I probably can foresee a day where Instagram is a bit more like Facebook, where it's a bit passé, it's crowded, the newsfeed is cluttered, it's not quite working.
Mm-hmm.
Will there be another Instagram, or is there always something waiting to undercut the competition, or will we just still be interacting with Facebook and Instagram but less, do you think?
So what's happened is they're too big to fail. Like Facebook is too big. It's got 2.4 billion users. And if you take out the third world, you take out China, who doesn't have Facebook or Instagram or any Western app, you're only left with about 2.4 billion people. So they've almost like got every single person on the platform. The only way that Facebook can grow user-wise is to get them on multiple platforms. And so that's why they're migrating all their Facebook users onto Instagram and WhatsApp and Messenger and so forth. So they own the information of a person that's on their phone. And so they are so big that I just cannot foresee a future where another company comes in and becomes bigger than them. I just can't see that happening. Like the only way that can happen is if the company fails, right? And then removes itself from the competition. But if a company gets too big or too much of a threat to Facebook just buys them,
That's right, yeah.
And they buy the IP, they buy all the services, they buy everything. Or in the case of like Snapchat, if they can't buy Snapchat, they go and launch the exact same identical feature the next day.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
They obliterate Snapchat. Like this is how powerful Instagram is. They were about to close, well, not close. Evan Spiegel, the CEO of Snapchat, didn't want to sell to Facebook. So the next day, Instagram launched Instagram Stories. And now that platform alone, inside Instagram, has got over 300 million daily active users. Snapchat has 181 million daily active users. So Instagram's already doubled what they've done in the last 8 years in the last like 8 to 10 months.
Yeah.
So that's how powerful Instagram and Facebook are. And so I can't foresee a future where someone comes in and creates like the next best thing. Something has to happen to the company itself if they don't just buy everything else anyways. And I just feel like they're so big, they just can't fail. But there'll always be bigger there'll always be different marketing opportunities. So in the future, you're going to get into like, there's a lot of audio advertisement like that's starting to happen around playlists and, you know, your Spotify.
And obviously as an audio person, I really believe in podcasting is a really big thing. I actually think that at the moment we're in the golden age of radio. I think that radio for you know, I'm only 5 years older than you, but when we were kids, radio was whatever was on the FM dial or the AM dial, and everything sounded the same, and it still sounds the same. AM and FM have not. I mean, I've worked in AM a lot, doing the same thing that they were doing a decade ago, 2 decades ago, and their businesses are growing online or whatever, but they just haven't, because it works for them. They're getting the ratings, but meanwhile, there are people in America, public radio in America are really good examples of this. They're doing this sort of incredible, beautiful sounding, like wonderful radio projects with producers that there are more people who would be working on half an hour of radio at public radio than there would be probably in an entire radio station of producers for AM. Like, they're so overstaffed, they're so over fact checked. They're just creating amazing content, and it's opening up this exciting world. I don't think radio has ever sounded better. I don't think it's ever sounded better. I think that it's only going to be going up from there. And there are a few people who are making businesses out of that at the moment. I just don't think there's a platform that quite works perfectly yet for matching advertisers and podcasters. I don't think there's... I remember reading someone who said, like, the only way that you can make money from podcasting is if you sell your podcasting material at the end of the day. Sell your micro. So it's one of those funny things where I think now is a good time to be getting into podcasting, you know, even a few years ago, because there isn't quite yet the way to sort of, I think there'll be big money coming into that very soon.
Well, what do you think is going to happen to radio over the next 10 years? Do you think it's going to get replaced by podcasts?
I love this story. I love this question. Radio, actually, at least when I was in AM radio a few years ago, there have never been more people listening to AM and FM radio right now in the world than there is. So people say radio is in decline. It actually isn't, because so long as people are in their cars, there are people listening to radio. So long as you're wondering what's happening in traffic, there will be radio.
Yeah.
AM and FM radio, AM especially, a lot of older Australians will have AM on 24/7 because they're used to the voices, and the amount of trust people have in their AM and FM presenters is incredible. They're really good marketing tools. These are the influences of of yesteryear. Because you do a live read or something, and because your host is saying it, it doesn't matter if it's an ad. Like I believe in such and such product because it helps me get up every day. I'm blah, blah. Even though it's clearly an ad, people trust it because it's coming from the voice of their people. So, but this is where things change. When baby boomers are probably the last sort of really big market for AM, and as they age and get older and remove themselves from the market, that will be a big turning point for radio. The other thing that may well change radio as we know it is when internet is a standard in cars. When cars you get off the lot have internet rolled in there, that's when things are going to be. And already phone integration is a big thing. Yeah. But when it's easier to get a podcast off your car than it is an AM or an FM station, that's when things are going to be changing. So we are still we're still on the cusp. Yeah. But there will be some big things happening, and they need to start adjusting now. And then I spoke to someone who runs a station in one of the capital cities in Australia the other day. I had a conversation with him when I was looking for a bit of work, and he said that he just doesn't believe in podcasting. He just he never sees how it's monetized, and he just doesn't think that it's got much of a future. And I was like, that's a bit dangerous, because I think that the writing is in the walls once internet is a standard, and it's because it's still not in cars. People still driving around 80s and 90s and early 2000 Commodores or whatever. When everyone has the internet in their car, that's when things will actually get quite scary for the industry.
Well, at the moment you have Bluetooth and auxiliary cords, so most people are plugging their phones in, I would have thought, straight away.
They do, but there's still don't forget the power of habit and laziness. When you're hitting the dial, you're still reaching for the dial in the center console. If you've got to go through and it's true that's changing things, but when there's a better integration system and everyone has it, and people like you and me, we're in our 40s and our 50s, that's when things are probably going to be, the radio industry will look very different. But if anyone's listening and they are interested in getting into radio as a journalist or otherwise, I would encourage you to do so. It's a wonderful, wonderful area to work in, and there are lots of opportunities. And people say that journalism is dead and never get into radio because radio is dead. That is actual bull, because there's a huge amount of jobs and a lot of movement there. So if you're interested in getting into radio producing, now's actually not a bad time to be doing it.
So why do you think it's increased the rate or the ratings, the numbers in radio?
I think it's just because a lot of people, the studies I've heard, it's just down to people in cars.
There's just more cars on the road?
Yeah, more cars on the road, more people, more cars, more traffic, more radio. The thing about radio is that this is across AM and FM. I don't know if you know this, but whoever is your breakfast host or presenter, they will carry your ratings for the rest of the day. So if you have Alan Jones in Sydney as the master of AM, he rates so strongly that his ratings, and you watch it on a graph, his ratings carry the entire day. So, and that's just because it's people turn it on in the car and it just stays on. So you always have to put your strongest stuff in the morning, and that's how ratings carry. And that it all just comes down to, people starting their day, turning on the radio, hearing what the weather is, hearing what the traffic is, and then plotting their lives around it. In Broome is a very, I was presenting to the entire of the Kimberley, and the Kimberley is, sometimes I would present to the Kimberley and the Pilbara, which is pretty much a patch of land which is almost the size of Queensland. I mean, think about that for a second. Huge amount of land, not that many people in it. But I think that I never had a lot of listener interaction. Just traditionally, that just doesn't happen. You don't get a lot of people who are calling in. You don't have a lot of chatter, because I think a part of that was because in these country towns, there are no traffic lights. There's no commute. There's nothing, there's no reason for people to be, you'll turn it on in the background of your house to be listening to it, but you miss out on a lot of your base. I got a few truckies because they're driving big loads back and forward.
Right.
So cars really are the key to talkback radio, I think, is the point of that little aside.
Cool. So how do you go about getting into radio? Or
if you're interested, so my path is my undergraduate degree was in television production, and I worked in television production for all of a month, I'd say. I was with this production company who I won't name, and I had some women who I was working with. I was bullied, and I felt like I was doing really menial work for someone, who had a lot to offer. So I was like, well, if I stay in television, I'm never going to be a producer. I'll just be a production assistant and then a production manager. So I had just finished my degree. The ink was still wet on my degree when I was like, forget this. I'm starting again. So I did a master's in journalism at UTS, which was probably one of the best decisions of my life, I'll say, because it put me on a completely different track. It is not enough, if you're interested in doing journalism or radio, it is not enough to have a degree, though. Let that be the first lesson I impart to you. You have to intern, and it's not fair. And I feel sorry for the students out there who have to keep full-time work to keep themselves afloat if they're studying. It really disadvantages poorer students, and I feel badly for that. It's elitist, but unfortunately is just the way the industry is. They will not hire you because you have a master's in journalism. They will hire you because while you were doing your master's in journalism, you interned a lot at the Sydney Morning Herald, or you interned a lot at one of the major newspapers. And sometimes you have to apply for internships. So I would apply for internships and not get the internships, applying for them like a job. You need an internship experience to get an internship. It's insane. It's like it's turtles all the way down. You couldn't imagine how frustrating it is when you're new, but you will get one, get something that's small, work your obscure friends. If your neighbour has a mate who works at the paper, hit them up. I know it feels embarrassing. It's a bit uncomfortable to ask strangers for favours, but in this industry, you work in really tight confines with people in really stressful situations, and a lot of what they want to make sure of, they just want to make sure that you're not a psychopath, or you're not going to be a jerk, or that you're, friendly or something like that. If you can ensure that happens, then they will, if they just need to vet you somehow. So get your foot in the door, intern a lot. I ended up interning at one of my radio stations, and then I was just doing work for free, and I was having a great time. And then one day someone was sick very unexpectedly, and I was actually at a second job, and they said, "Can you come in? We need someone to help out today." And I was actually in the office of my other job, and I said, "I'm sorry, I've got to go. I've got an opportunity that will actually, I wouldn't be making the same money," but I said to my boss, "I've got to go. This is an opportunity that will get me in the door." And they were nice about it. They said, "Fine, just go."
Yeah.
And after that, it was all fine.
Well, there you go. Question, the amount of money, how much does it cost to advertise, in your experience, on the radio, like for different types of segments and audiences and so forth?
Look, this has never been my area. Like, the sales department always works quite separately with the journalists, and they would always fight like cats and dogs, FYI. That's like, there was always, and it's always never quite smooth sailing either, because you've got the sales department not only has to appease their clients, they also have to appease the host. So if you're putting in an ad, I don't know what an ad, I imagine it would be in the tens of thousands, I imagine. I can't give you any solid numbers. If you wanted to do a live read is when the host will read out a written thing about your product live on radio. Like, whenever I get my hair cut, I like to get it done at Joan's Salon, because she does the best haircut and I always look fresh. Go to Joan's Salon, it's, 123 Fake Drive. Joan's Salon, that sort of stuff, that will cost a lot more, because there's the fact that it's coming out of the voice of the host lends it a lot more credibility. And you would buy a week of those, for example.
It's kind of like an Instagram influencer ad.
Exactly like one. And I knew if the host believed in the product, they'd maybe give it a push during the show as well. And the results that some of these companies had was quite insane.
Yeah.
Like, there was one company that was just a pillow company. One of the hosts had enjoyed the pillows before he was actually a user of the product, and he really believed in the product, and he eventually said, "Mate, you should put some advertising on the station, because you really, I think this would go off." And because he believed it when he read the live read, and he'd plug it and he'd say, "Oh, I used to have neck problems, and then I did this, and like, oh my goodness, my life is so much better." And then they give a free one away for a calling competition. We'd have a pile of pillows in the office, and if someone had a great comment, we'd send them a pillow. And the company grew so quickly that they couldn't actually flog, like, he couldn't make the pillows fast enough to send them out. Again, just because, the person who was selling, I think there's a lot to be said about authenticity, that you believe the product that you're selling out there, and that the host believes in it as well. So it can be expensive. It has to be the right thing. It has to be the right product. It has to be targeted to the right audience. But it is, I think it's a really good way of selling for now.
Do you feel like there's something to be said about Instagram influencers that just promote anything and everything, and what that might do to their overall brand and result?
Again, one of the same host who I worked with, I won't name drop, but he's known in the industry. He's a lovely bloke, and he was a bit of a mentor for me earlier on, and he said a lot about authenticity, that being authentic is really important in radio. Like, you can, if you're doing sort of talkback radio, you have an exaggerated version of yourself. Yeah. Like, you're not yourself, you're a slightly exaggerated person, but you've got to have whatever you say on radio kind of align with what you believe. Because if you align your beliefs with what you think your audience wants to hear, it won't be authentic. And I think that comes out a lot with the products that you endorse. I think you actually have to genuinely believe in the product. Unless it's a huge amount of money, then you have to make yourself believe that you like the product. Because I think that the audience, I follow all those Geordie, this is my guilty pleasure, I follow the Geordie Shore girls, right? They're thick as two planks, very lovely girls, I'm sure, but they will promote anything that's in front of them.
Yeah.
And they just, but they don't give enough of themselves on their app. Like, they've got to, I think that they don't balance, they push too many products but don't show enough of themselves. So you feel like you're just being treated like an ad audience, and I think that's a bit of resentment comes through that way. I think that's the balance. I don't have to worry about this because no one wants me to sell their products. But this is what I have observed as an outsider.
Right, yeah. So do you know the name of this documentary that we're putting out?
I do. The working title, I don't actually know when it's going to be on the airwaves. These things take a lot of time work, but it's... have you ever read the book How to Win Friends and Influence People?
Yep.
So I think that this one is going to be called How to Win Followers and Be an Influencer. Okay. So it's kind of a take on that Dale Carnegie book, which was the first self-help book ever written. It's kind of following that. All
right, cool. And do you have any ballpark, not an official date, but how?
Hopefully this year.
Hopefully this year.
Look, I've got a deadline that's sort of floating around the August mark, but it just depends when it goes to air. There's lots of other shows, because they commission a lot.
Yeah.
A lot gets commissioned, and then you've got to work it out and cut it all together. There is a enormous amount of editing and scripting that goes into this. So this is my life for the next few days, but if you listen to it, you'll probably like it.
Right. So again, guys that are listening, putting out a documentary, how to win Instagram followers and influence
and
people.
Become an influencer.
Become an influencer.
See, it's a pun.
It's a documentary that will be broadcasted on ABC National and hopefully this year. And I will keep everyone posted as to when that is coming out and how you can listen. But for this episode, what do you reckon? We wrap it up on that?
I think we've done quite well. This is poor Jackson's second interview today, so I think you probably deserve a bit of a break now.
Yeah, no, we'll go for another coffee, I think, and kickstart. But yeah, guys, if you've enjoyed this episode, and I hope that you have gotten a few little bits of information out of it, make sure you execute, because execution is everything. I've had a lovely chat here today, and thanks for having me on your documentary, Stephanie.
Well, thank you for having me on your podcast.
There we go, trade for trade. And guys, if you have enjoyed it, leave a comment on the website or a review on whichever platform you are listening on. Again, guys, I will see you next week, and I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Thanks, Stephanie, again, and until next time.